Nora was a determined 7-year-old who had always been shy around strangers. Her parents, Linda and James, worried that their daughter dragged her feet at the mention of sleepovers or group activities. However, they took comfort in her bright imagination. In her pink-hued bedroom, crammed with stuffed animals and picture books, Nora would spend hours chatting, alone yet oddly content. Keen to support her development, Linda would sometimes linger outside Nora's door, overhearing her one-sided conversations. Each time, she found Nora whispering softly away, as if her daughter was carefully listening to someone responding. Yet when Linda went in to check, Nora appeared perfectly normal, like any other child with an imaginary friend. For weeks, Nora had been talking about her friend, Millie, who apparently loved picking flowers from the vacant lot behind their house. Nora would describe Millie's silky red hair and blue denim dress as though she were recalling the features of a real person. She claimed that Millie always lingered out near the tall grass while Nora played on the swing set. Linda thought it was more than a little odd how thoroughly her daughter had invented this friend, but she brushed it off. Children conjured up imaginary companions all the time. That was nothing new. Yet Linda's complacency started to fade when Nora began to mention things a 7-year-old couldn't possibly know. At first, they were small details, like the old decrepit barn off Route 32. Nora announced it was once a bustling orchard that closed years ago. Linda was curious, so she quick called James, certain they must have passed the orchard at some point, and Nora had overheard them talking. James said no. He knew the orchard in question had been shut since the 1980s and never came up in conversation. Shaken and puzzled, Linda ended the call. She tried to reason it away. Perhaps Nora had overheard local chatter at the grocery store or at her grandparents' house. Regardless, she couldn't shake a feeling that something was off. Then came more troubling comments. Nora claimed that Millie knew about a missing teenager who vanished from the orchard many years before Nora was even born. The moment Linda heard her daughter say that, she felt a chill spreading up her spine. Local legends told of a teenage girl who never came home from her farm chores. But Linda certainly had never mentioned that to her daughter. Knowing details of a decades-old disappearance was an entirely different matter. Linda wanted to confront Nora about it, but each time she tried, Nora would slip away in giggles or become frustrated that she was not being believed. As the days passed, Linda found herself caught in a storm of questions and doubt. She sat with James at the kitchen table after dinner one evening, dishes piled in the sink. Nora was upstairs humming a lullaby. Linda whispered that their daughter was talking about not just one missing teen, but multiple people, each one lost to time in their small town. Nora said Millie claimed to have seen them all before they vanished, and that she could still smell the orchard apples that somehow seemed drenched in sadness. It shook Linda to her core. How would a child ever conceive such stories? She decided that if the details didn't stop soon, she would consider counseling, or at least see if her daughter was picking up local rumors. The next day, Linda was working a morning shift at the local florist when she received a frantic, hushed phone call from her mother, who often babysat Nora after school. "Linda," her mother had said in a quavering voice, "I overheard Nora talking about that big tree near the orchard. She said, it's the tree where the policeman found a missing woman's scarf. How on earth does Nora know about something that happened so long ago?" Linda's mother had grown up in the area and vaguely remembered a rumor of a lost hiker whose scarf was discovered near that orchard, but no one had ever found the woman or traced her final steps. Deeper alarm took hold of Linda as the evidence mounted. Soon after that incident, Linda started keeping a journal of Nora's comments, scribbling down the references to each disappearance. The things Nora relayed about the orchard turned into an obsession for Linda. She spent free moments researching old news articles, verifying whether her daughter's outlandish stories had an actual basis in truth. Unfortunately, Linda discovered Nina Becker, age 15, who vanished while picking apples. Then Mrs. Tolley, an older woman tending to her late husband's orchard. More names emerged. None of them new to locals who grew up with these frightening headlines. Some had no resolution at all. Bodies were never located. Somehow her little girl knew about them. One late afternoon, Linda decided to question Nora discreetly. She pretended to be uninterested, sitting with her casual cup of coffee while Nora was drawing quietly at the dining table. "Sweetheart," Linda said, trying to keep her voice gentle, "what were you and Millie talking about just now?" Nora paused her crayons for a moment. "We were talking about that orchard again," she said. Her tone was nonchalant, as though discussing her favorite cartoon. "Millie wants me to go see it with her. She said we might find something important there." Linda's heart skipped a beat. "And? What would that be?" she asked cautiously. Nora shrugged, returning to her scribbles. "I don't know for sure," she said. "Millie said something like bones and old ribbons, but I wasn't really paying attention." Linda felt a prickle of horror. Bones and old ribbons. She had read about a rumor years ago that scraps of a ribbon were found near the orchard, presumably belonging to the teenage girl, but the accounts were never confirmed by authorities. "Sweetheart," Linda continued softly, "are you sure Millie's not just telling you scary stories?" Nora raised her eyes, wide and earnest. "It's not a made-up story," she said. "Millie says she's showing me what's real." Now terrified, Linda declined her next shift at the florist so she could drive to the local library archives. After sifting through microfilm copies of old newspapers, articles about long-forgotten missing persons leapt off the pages. Indeed, someone's half-decayed shoe was found in 1979 near the orchard. Another article from 1985 described sightings of a child's abandoned ribbon in the high grass. Linda tore out photocopies of everything she could find. She felt as though she were stepping into the murky edges of an unsolved puzzle, guided by a bizarre new presence that lived in her daughter's mind. The orchard's name came up, over and over. That evening, Linda shared her findings with James. "It's uncanny," she breathed, showing him the yellowed news clippings about local vanishings. James, clearly rattled, tried to keep a steady demeanor. "So you're saying Nora, our 7-year-old, knows about all these missing people through this imaginary friend?" Linda nodded, feeling adrenaline spike through her. "I don't know how. It's terrifying. I'm just not sure what to do." James closed his eyes and exhaled. "We'll keep a closer watch on her. Make sure she doesn't wander off. The orchard's private property now anyway. No trespassing signs everywhere. There's no reason she'd have access, but just in case, let's keep an eye out." Less than a week later, Linda found Nora in her bedroom, coat already zipped and socks mismatched, talking animatedly to thin air. Linda froze on the threshold, heart pounding with unwelcome suspense. "Where are you going?" she asked, feigning casualness as she stepped inside. Nora jumped slightly, spinning around. "We're going to the orchard, Mommy. Millie said I should bring a shovel." Linda's face blanched, and she had to work to stop her voice from trembling. "Honey, you can't just go off there. You know that's not allowed." Nora gave an exasperated sigh, as though her mother's ignorance was exhausting. "But Millie said we can fix everything if we just dig in the right spot." Linda's worst fears erupted. Did this friend intend to lure Nora somewhere dangerous? Did her daughter truly believe that the orchard held bones and clues? Linda forced a smile. "How about we wait for Daddy to get home and then all of us can talk about it together?" Nora's face fell, but she relented, dropping the small kitty shovel. Linda's mind reeled. She had never heard her daughter speak so resolutely about something that sounded so macabre. When James returned, Linda recounted the entire conversation, voice quavering with dread. James, anxiety shooting through him, resolved to question Nora in the calmest manner possible. After dinner, while Nora bathed, both parents sat on the hallway floor, leaning against the wall. As the water gurgled down the drain, Nora's voice drifted in song. "Maybe we need outside help," Linda whispered. "A child psychologist, some professional. This feels so real to her." James rubbed a hand over his tense jawline. "Let's try to reason with her first," he said softly. "If that fails, we get help. But let's see if we can piece together what's happening in her mind." They decided to put Nora to bed earlier than usual and gently guide her conversation toward Millie. They read her a fairy tale, then asked if she wanted to tell them anything. "Millie was upset we didn't go," Nora murmured, burrowing into the covers. "She said people don't believe what really matters." Linda blinked. "What matters, sweetheart?" she coaxed. Nora's reply came quietly. Millie told me she's lonely. She said that orchard belongs to her. She said she used to live there with her family who had an apple stand, but then something bad happened to her. Jill prickled the nape of Linda's neck. And how did Millie tell you all this? She whispered. She just whispers into my ear, Nora explained, small shrug visible under the covers. She said she knows about the missing people because she was there too, then she had to leave. Nora yawned, clearly tired. Linda and James exchanged alarmed glances, but forced themselves to smile calmly. They kissed Nora on the forehead, patted her stuffed teddy, and switched off the light. Later, Linda struggled to fall asleep, mind abuzz with the question, could the orchard's tragedy be connected to this so-called Millie? The next day, Linda made good on her plan and scheduled an appointment with an experienced child psychologist named Dr. Harwood. The earliest she could book was a week away. That left them 7 more days to keep a careful watch on Nora while trying not to feed any imaginary illusions. Meanwhile, Linda still felt compelled to do more research. She visited the county clerk's office, rummaging through old property records on her lunch break, searching for families that used to own the orchard. Sure enough, she found mention of the Hatter family, who operated a small orchard decades before bankruptcy forced them to sell. There was a daughter, Mildred Hatter, aged 8. Mildred's name froze Linda's pulse. That little girl had died tragically in a barn fire on the property nearly 40 years ago. A trembling swirl of confusion and shock filled Linda's mind. Had Nora somehow latched onto a local ghost story, contorting it into Millie's persona? She hurried to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The more Linda tried to rationalize, the more her nerves angled her toward fear. If Millie was a figment of Nora's imagination, how had Nora divined her actual name from local records? Linda wondered about forging forward to that orchard right now to see for herself, but fear gripped her and urged caution. However, the questions wouldn't rest. Late that same Tuesday afternoon, Linda found herself behind the steering wheel, Nora strapped into the back seat after school, the orchard's location in the GPS. She had told James she needed to run an errand. She wasn't sure why she acted so impulsively to drive near that place. Maybe it was her maternal, protective instinct. She wanted to confirm that there was nothing there but weeds and an old barn. In a moment of hesitation, she glanced at Nora in the rearview mirror. Nora stared out the window, humming something under her breath. Was that the same lullaby Linda once heard her singing at bedtime? They arrived at the orchard's perimeter, greeted by a sagging chain-link fence and a private property no trespassing sign. Linda parked outside, engine idling. Through the fence, she could make out the orchard's skeleton, twisted, leafless apple trees, and a dilapidated barn leaning precariously. No one had set foot here for a while. Wind rustled tall grass. Something about the sight unnerved Linda. She carefully reached over, locked Nora's door, and said, "We're just looking, honey. We're not going in." But Nora was staring wide-eyed, her face almost pressed to the window, as though transfixed. "Millie's in there," she said softly. Linda's stomach clenched. She wanted to say something reassuring, but nothing came. That moment, a memory flitted through Linda's mind. The old newspaper article about the orchard going up in flames. Mildred, or Millie, had been rumored to run for help but never made it out. Linda's eyes darted back to Nora. She was still pressed to the glass, but no longer humming. Her lips were parted, as if listening to something invisible. Then, in a sudden rush, Nora's small hand reached for the door handle. Linda lunged, flicking on the child lock from the front seat and snapping, "Nora, no!" Upset by her mother's panic, Nora burst into tears. Linda tried to comfort her, voice shaky with adrenaline, and quickly reversed the car from the orchard's entrance. They drove home mostly in silence, but Nora's eyes brimmed with unspoken frustration. She said only one thing. Millie said I promised to help her find what's lost. That night, Linda recounted the entire orchard trip to James. "I should have never taken her there," she whispered, pacing. James hunched on the sofa, a hand pressed to his forehead. "This is out of control," he admitted. "We have to keep her away from that place. Until Dr. Harwood can see her, We just have to keep her safe." They agreed to step up their vigilance. Nora's grandmother would also be told to keep a sharp eye. No more illusions of normalcy. They needed to treat this as the threat it could be. But Nora's obsession with Millie only deepened. She spoke less to her parents and more to her imaginary friend. She'd linger under the oak tree in the backyard, whispering. Whenever Linda or James tried to approach, Nora would spin around and glare at them, as though fiercely protective of her confidant. On a few occasions, Linda caught glimpses of something out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of red or a child-sized shape between the trees. Each time she forced herself to dismiss it as imagination, yet fear snaked through her. On the fourth day before the appointment with Dr. Harwood, Nora disappeared for half an hour. Linda's panic soared when she realized Nora was not playing in the backyard. She ran through the house, checking closets and rooms. The front door was locked, but the side door leading toward the vacant lot was slightly ajar. Shouting Nora's name, Linda scrambled across the lot, high grass brushing her knees. 15 agonizing minutes later, she found Nora standing behind an oak tree with a battered old spoon in hand, scraping at the dirt. "Nora!" Linda cried, tears pricking her eyes. "What are you doing?" Nora looked up, tears in her own eyes from frustration. "Millie said we might find more clues," she said. "But there's nothing here. Maybe it's not the right place." Linda scooped Nora into her arms, ignoring her protests, and carried her back home. Every nerve in Linda's body was frayed. She wanted to scream at the cruelty of this situation. Her child, a magnet for ghostly whispers or horrifying illusion. Could it be that Millie's spirit roamed free, demanding closure after decades of sorrow? Linda felt borderline delusional just considering it, but no other explanation felt sufficient. Finally, Dr. Harwood's appointment arrived. Linda and James led a sullen Nora inside the cozy office, filled with pastel paintings and plush chairs. Dr. Harwood, a soft-spoken woman with a gentle demeanor, asked Nora to draw pictures of her friend while Linda and James waited in the reception area. After half an hour, Dr. Harwood called them in. "Nora speaks of Millie as though she's absolutely real," Dr. Harwood explained in a soothing tone. "I've had children describe imaginary friends who reflect their own emotional struggles. But your daughter's friend is unusually detailed, and alarmingly so. I'm concerned that Nora feels a deep sense of responsibility and fear." Linda and James exchanged glances. James cleared his throat. "We suspect Nora knows secrets about Old Town disappearances that a child shouldn't. Could she be hearing rumors or making them up?" Dr. Harwood tapped her pen lightly on her notepad. "Children's imaginations are incredibly rich, but the consistency of these details is unique. Usually, the child draws from personal experience or overheard stories. You may need to look at your entire environment to see what might be feeding Nora's narrative." Linda opened her mouth, about to mention the orchard's tragedy in the property records, but faltered. She wasn't sure how to say it without sounding paranoid. Dr. Harwood gently suggested a plan. Reduce stress at home, monitor Nora's play to see if it triggers certain recollections, and come in for follow-up sessions. "If anything escalates, call me," she said, handing Linda a card. It wasn't the concrete solution Linda desperately wanted, but at least the next evening, while James was finishing some extra work in his home office, Linda found Nora idly flipping through a picture book on the living room floor. Linda sat down next to her daughter, ruffling her hair. "Honey," Linda said softly, "Daddy and I want to understand Millie better. Can you tell us what she wants?" Nora pressed her lips together, then spoke in a small voice. "Millie needs help finding what was lost. She said that if I can help, then she'll let the missing ones come home." Linda's breath caught in her chest. "The missing ones?" she echoed. Nora nodded. "Said it started with that orchard fire. She can't rest, and neither can the others." Linda's heart fluttered. "Tell me more, sweetie," she whispered desperately. Nora's gaze traveled to the window. "She said there's something hidden in the barn. Something that will make people know the truth," she murmured. Then her eyes flickered back to Linda. "We have to go there, Mommy." That night was a stormy one. Rain pounded the roof, lightning igniting the sky. The power flickered twice. James suggested they bring Nora into their bedroom for the night, worried about nightmares. But sometime around midnight, Linda jolted awake to the crack of thunder, heart pounding, and discovered Nora was gone from their bed. James also bolted upright and exhaled a trembling curse. They hurried through the house, searching. The front door was locked, as was the side door. Finally, Linda discovered the back door leading into the yard. It was open, blowing in the howling wind. They dashed outside, calling Nora's name. Rain instantly drenched them. Flashlight beams flickered over the yard, the vacant lot, the tall grass. Then Linda spotted movement by the fence line. Racing over, they found Nora trying to climb through a gap in the chain-link fence that bordered the orchard's property. Mud clung to the hem of her pajamas, her hair plastered to her forehead. Terror spiked in Linda's chest. How had she made it this far in the dead of night? James snatched Nora into his arms, ignoring her wriggling protests. She let out a shriek, fighting him. Linda grabbed her daughter's face between cold hands. "Nora, baby, no!" she cried. "You can't go there!" Nora's tears mingled with the rain. "Millie said it has to be tonight," she sobbed, "or the clues will wash away." James, breathing ragged, flung his arms around Nora and Linda, forcibly dragging them back to the house. The child screamed in frustration, thrashing as thunder boomed overhead. Once inside, all three were soaked and trembling. James sank to the floor, holding Nora tightly as Linda locked the door and slid down next to them. Nora's cries slowed into ragged sobs. In her tear-streaked face, Linda saw a confusion that only deepened her fear. Nora truly believed that if she did not go, something more terrible might happen. A wave of pity and dread coursed through Linda. "We'll figure this out," she murmured, rocking Nora in her arms. "We'll figure this out together." The morning after the storm, the orchard property was scattered with branches and debris. The ground likely turned to mush. Linda felt exhausted, as if she'd aged 5 years overnight. She stayed home from work, letting Nora rest. After dropping off some groceries, Linda's mother sat with Linda at the kitchen table, sipping tea with trembling hands. "I've lived in this town all my life," Linda's mother said. "I've never heard anything quite like this, except that Orchard has always had a dark reputation." She dabbed her eyes, voice frail with concern. "But talk of spirits or ghosts, that's the stuff of old wives' tales, dear." Linda considered her mother's words. Then, in a sudden resolve, she whispered, "I think I need to go there myself." Her mother blanched. "You can't. It could be dangerous, especially if it's abandoned. Who knows about the structure or the vagrants?" But Linda's mind was set. She didn't want Nora exposed to that place again. She wanted to put an end to these nightmares. Perhaps she could discover some hidden relic in the barn. A letter, personal artifact, or local record that could give closure to multiple unsolved disappearances. If such an object existed, maybe it would free Nora from Millie's pull. Though once Nora had drifted off to an afternoon nap, Linda left her mother in charge and drove alone to the orchard. Sunlight streaked the air with that odd clarity that comes after a storm. The orchard was vacant, the battered fence standing askew. Linda parked a short distance away and sneaked in through the same gap Nora had nearly climbed through. Her heart thumped so loudly that it echoed in her ears. Decaying apple trees swayed in the breeze, skeletal arms reaching for the sky. At the far end loomed the dilapidated barn. Linda noted evidence of the storm, branches scattered, muddy puddles glistening. She forced her feet forward. Inside the barn, beams of sunlight poked through cracks in the roof. The stench of rotting wood filled the air. Linda panned her flashlight around. Broken crates, rusted farm tools, and piles of hay flanked the walls. Everything felt ominously still. Linda swallowed a lump of fear. She thought of Nora's whispered words, something hidden in the barn. She moved slowly, scanning the floor. Then she noticed a collapsed section of boards, half rotten, near the back. She braced herself on a post and crouched to see underneath. The beam of her flashlight illuminated a small metal box nestled in the dirt. Her heart kicked into overdrive. Gingerly, she tugged the box out. It was padlocked, its surface scarred by rust. She placed it on an overturned crate and rummaged around, discovering an old crowbar that she used to pry off the weakened lock. The lid screeched open. Inside were scraps of old documents, charred at the edges, and a photograph. Linda's hand trembled as she picked it up. A family of 3, father, mother, and a little girl with red hair, grinned at the camera in front of the orchard. Mildred Hatter, indeed. She flipped through partially burned letters, struggling to read. Snippets spoke of mounting debt, arguments with a lender, and mention of neighbors gone missing. Another letter, scrawled in shaky handwriting, read, "They keep coming. The orchard draws them, then they vanish. We can't protect them. We can't sell the orchard without revealing its secrets. Mildred senses their presence." Linda's blood ran cold. The orchard had some dark pull, apparently. She rummaged deeper and found a tattered child's diary page. The handwriting was uneven, likely Mildred's own. She saw references to strange lights, scared at night, and the final chilling line, "He told me to keep the orchard safe. But I'm so scared. I hear crying in the trees." Linda's insides nodded, though no direct explanation leapt out. Linda sensed that these clues might confirm the orchard's malevolent history, or at least prove the orchard had drawn tragedy. She pressed the documents back into the metal box, her hands shaking so violently that she fumbled. With a surge of determination, she realized that if the missing persons were connected, revealing the orchard's secrets might bring them closure. Maybe this was what Millie wanted, for the truth to be found at last. Linda tucked the box under her arm and hurried out of the barn, adrenaline fueling her every step. She clambered back through the fence, nearly stumbling in the mud, and raced back to her car. Tears blurred her vision as she wondered if this discovery could finally free her daughter of Millie's voice. Back home, she found Nora awake on the sofa, eyes tired but calmer. Linda approached gently, the metal box in her hands. She sat beside her daughter, letting her see it. "I found something in that old barn, honey," she said softly. Nora's gaze flicked to the box, and a flash of recognition passed over her features, as if she could sense Millie's presence. Linda opened the box, showing the singed letters and the photograph. Nora stared, lips parted. Then, her small fingers reached out to the photo of Mildred Hatter. "That's Millie," she whispered hoarsely. Linda was too stunned to speak. Nora's shoulders trembled as if releasing a held breath. She pressed her nose close to the picture, as if offering comfort. Then, in the silence of that bright living room, Nora squeaked out, "Millie says thank you." Linda felt her heart lurch. Father and daughter sat together, the old metal box resting between them. Linda wondered if the orchard's hold would finally loosen. The missing might still remain lost, but the orchard story could be revealed. The truth, once hidden, was in their hands. In the following days, Linda debated handing the box over to the police or local historical society, unsure if it would truly solve any cold cases, yet she had no doubt it was a step toward healing. Nora's talk of Millie slowed. Instead, she spoke, more like a typical child. At bedtime, the imaginary friend's seat at the edge of the bed remained empty and silent. Each time Linda saw Nora absently chatting to herself, the conversation no longer seemed drenched in dread. One evening, as the sun set in a final burst of red beyond the orchard's silhouette, Nora climbed onto Linda's lap and rested her head on her shoulder. "Millie's going to sleep now," she whispered. Linda's eyes misted. "She'll be okay, right?" Nora asked with childlike hope. Linda nodded, hugging her close. Deep in her chest, she harbored a strange certainty that the orchard's restless spirit had finally found some measure of peace. Still, as a mother, Linda's vigilance remained watchful. Objects or words from the past can lurk in the present, shaping nightmares or guiding revelations. For now, though, a hush settled over their home, the hush of a story once hidden, finally allowed to be told. And through it all, Linda held fast to her daughter, grateful that in the end, they had not lost what mattered most.